She is 37 years old now, a seasoned artist who has carved her name into the annals of the adult film industry. Ariella Ferreira, a name that evokes images of smoldering intensity and a commanding presence, currently resides in the sun-scorched landscapes of Las Vegas, Nevada, a city of illusions that somehow suits her real-life resilience. While precise figures are notoriously guarded, industry insiders estimate her annual earnings to be in the ballpark of $300,000 to $500,000, a testament to her longevity and business acumen in a fiercely competitive field. Her body is a masterpiece of mature, voluptuous femininity, a testament to her Cuban and Italian heritage. She stands with the confident posture of a woman who knows her power, her figure full and inviting, with generous hips that curve dramatically from a waist that remains strikingly defined, a testament to disciplined upkeep. Her breasts are magnificent and full, a topic of much speculation. They are, in fact, the result of skilled augmentation, enhancing her natural endowment to create a silhouette that is both formidable and elegant. But it is her face that truly captivates. Framed by dark, often raven-colored hair, her eyes are her most arresting feature. They are a deep, liquid brown, large and expressive, capable of conveying a challenge, a shared secret, or a profound, soul-deep sadness in a single glance. They are windows to a history far more complex than the roles she often plays. Before the stage names and the camera lights, before the accolades and the notoriety, she was simply Ariella, a girl with a dancer's soul and a heart too big for her small world. Her story, the one not logged on film databases, begins in the humid, rhythmic heart of Miami. She was 17, all sharp angles and soft dreams, her body not yet the curvaceous icon it would become. She worked at a small, family-owned Cuban cafe, a place smelling of strong coffee, fried plantains, and old men's gossip. Her world was a predictable loop of school, work, and the quiet tension of a home filled with unspoken expectations. She felt like a ghost in her own life, until he walked in. His name was Mateo. He wasn't from her neighborhood, he was from the other side of the tracks, quite literally. He was a few years older, an artist who painted vast, turbulent murals on the sides of forgotten buildings. He came into the cafe one Tuesday afternoon, a storm of charcoal-smudged clothes and intense, focused energy. He ordered a cortadito, and when she handed him the small cup, their fingers brushed. It wasn't just a touch, it was a circuit completing. His eyes, the color of dark honey, held hers, and in that moment, the clatter of the cafe faded into a distant hum. He saw her. Not the girl serving coffee, but the woman yearning to break free. He started coming in every day, always at the same time, always sitting at the same small table in the corner. He would sketch in a worn leather pad, stealing glances at her. He called her Mi Musa, his muse. For weeks, they communicated in a language of shy smiles and lingering looks. Then, one rainy evening as she was closing up, he was waiting for her under the awning, his motorcycle parked at the curb. "I want to show you something," he said, his voice a low rumble that competed with the thunder. Without a second thought, a recklessness she never knew she possessed, she climbed on behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. He drove them to a derelict warehouse district. On the vast blank brick wall of an abandoned factory, he was painting a mural. It was a breathtaking, almost violent explosion of color, a phoenix rising from a sea of flames, its wings spread wide, its eyes burning with fierce life. And the phoenix, she realized with a jolt that stole her breath, had her face. "This is how I see you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Trapped, but about to become magnificent." That was the beginning. Their love affair was a Florida summer storm, intense, passionate, and ultimately, destructive. They would meet in secret, in his tiny studio apartment filled with canvases and the smell of turpentine. He taught her about art, about passion, about a world beyond her narrow horizon. He sketched her for hours, not as a sexual object, but as a subject of profound beauty and depth. With him, she felt truly seen for the first time. She was the hidden masterpiece he was determined to unveil to the world, and to herself. But their worlds were on a collision course. Her family, traditional and protective, would never approve of a struggling, older artist from a rough background. His world was one of chaos and creation, of late nights and uncertain tomorrows. The pressure built, a slow creeping tide of reality threatening their perfect, private island. The inevitable explosion came on a sweltering night. Her father, having grown suspicious, followed her. He found them at the studio, wrapped in each other, lost in a world of their own making. The confrontation was ugly, filled with shouted accusations and bitter tears. Matteo, proud and fiery, refused to back down. He pleaded with her, his eyes begging her to choose him, to choose their life, their art, their future. But she was young, and the weight of family duty and fear was a chain she couldn't break. With a heart shattering into a million pieces, she looked at him, at the beautiful, desperate hope in his honey-colored eyes, and she walked away. She left him standing in the doorway of his studio, the half-finished portrait of her on the easel inside, a ghost of what could have been. It was a clean, brutal cut, the kind that never truly heals. She buried that part of herself, the girl who was a muse, and tried to become the woman her family wanted. But the fire he had lit in her would not be extinguished. It smoldered for years, a dormant volcano, until it finally found another outlet, in another city, under the bright, unforgiving lights of a different kind of art. The memory of Luca was a phantom pain, a constant, dull ache for a life of color and sound in a world that had turned gray and silent. Stella moved to London to pursue her postgraduate studies, just as her family had planned. She exchanged the Roman sun for English drizzle, the scent of turpentine for the smell of highlighter ink on academic journals. She became a ghost in the hallowed halls of university libraries, her Botticelli eyes now shadowed with a quiet resignation. She dated a succession of nice, predictable men, a fellow academic, a banker, a lawyer. They were all perfectly suitable, and with each one, she felt a little more of her soul wither. The passionate, chaotic girl who had run across Roman rooftops was gone, replaced by a polite, well-mannered shell. The breaking point came during a dreary Tuesday afternoon seminar on neoclassical portraiture. The professor was droning on about idealized forms and moral purity when Stella's gaze drifted to a small, projected image of a Jacques-Louis David painting. It was technically perfect, cold, and utterly lifeless. In that moment, she was violently thrown back to Luca's studio, to the portrait he had painted of her. It was flawed, human, bursting with raw emotion and dramatic shadows. It was alive. And she realized, with a jolt that stole her breath, that she had not been living for years. She had been preserving herself, like a specimen in a museum, and she was slowly crumbling into dust. That night, in her small, beige London flat, she did something she hadn't allowed herself to do in years. She searched for Luca online. Her hands trembled as she typed his name. And there he was. He had become successful. His restoration work was now sought after by museums across Europe, and his own paintings, a series of dramatic, shadowy portraits of everyday people, were causing a stir in the contemporary art scene. He was in London for a major solo exhibition. The opening was in 2 days. A recklessness she hadn't felt since she was 19 surged through her. It was insane. It was impulsive. It was everything her life was not. Without allowing herself to think, she bought a ticket. The gallery was in a converted warehouse in Shoreditch, a world away from the staid academic circles she inhabited. It was packed with the city's chic and artistic elite. Stella felt like an imposter in her sensible blouse and tailored trousers. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she pushed her way through the crowd, her eyes scanning the walls. And then she saw it. Hanging in a place of honor, larger than she remembered and illuminated by a single, perfect spotlight, was the portrait. The portrait he had painted of her a lifetime ago. It was even more powerful than she remembered. The eyes he had captured, her eyes, seemed to stare out across the room, filled with a sorrowful wisdom that now felt prophetic. The plaque beside it read, "Perduta, lost." She stood frozen, the noise of the gallery fading into a distant roar. She was back in Rome, feeling the rough texture of his jacket, smelling the turpentine, hearing his laugh. She didn't hear him approach, but she felt his presence, a shift in the air she would have recognized anywhere. Slowly, she turned. He was standing a few feet away. Older, his face more lined, his hair shorter, but his eyes were the same, deep, intelligent, and now, filled with a quiet, profound shock. He was holding a glass of wine, and his knuckles were white. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, a decade of silence and unsaid words hanging between them. The well-dressed crowd seemed to part around them, sensing the electric, private intensity of the moment. "Stella," he finally said, her name a breath, a prayer, on his lips. It was the first time she had heard him say it in 10 years. The sound was a key turning in a lock she thought was sealed forever. "You kept it," she managed to whisper, her voice trembling, gesturing weakly toward the painting. "Of course I kept it," he replied, his voice low and thick with emotion. He took a step closer. "It was the truest thing I ever painted. I could never paint anything that true again." He looked at her, his gaze traveling over her face, taking in the woman she had become. "You look—" He trailed off, searching for the word. "Polished." It wasn't a compliment. It was an observation, tinged with sadness. "I got lost," she confessed, the words tumbling out. "I got lost on the path I was supposed to take." Luca nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. "I know the feeling," he said. "I've spent 10 years traveling the world, trying to find the light I saw in a library in Rome. I never could." He gestured around the crowded, successful gallery. "All of this, it's just noise. The only thing that was ever real was that." He pointed to the painting, to the girl she had been. The carefully constructed walls around Stella's heart crumbled. The polished, academic woman vanished, and the Roman girl, the muse, the passionate soul, was right there, raw and exposed. The story wasn't over. It had simply been waiting, paused, for the two main characters to find their way back to the same canvas. The gallery, the people, her life in London, it all faded into insignificance. They were the only two people in the world, standing in a pool of light, with a decade of regret and a single burning chance at a second act hanging in the balance between them.